whatever you are, however you are at this moment, when you can accept that you are lovable, then the fear starts to dissolve. It's allowing your own beauty. It's allowing the beauty of your soul, which is behind your personality. It's behind all that stuff. Just another radiant bit of light, another soul. And I think at this moment, it's nothing violent to do. You just observe the kind of sadness, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling of separateness, the feeling of pain. You just watch it and allow it. And don't get too fierce about it, and don't feel too deprived about it, and don't milk the self-pity of it. You know, just notice that it's just a passing show. It's just another place your mind is grabbing. It's all mind. You realize that? The only thing you're stuck in is not even history. It's just mind. It's a model you have of who you think you are and who you think everybody else is. That's all it is. That's exactly what's causing your suffering at this moment, is your own platforms. And you're clinging to them and saying, this is real.
That was a quote by Ram Dass. Ram Dass is somebody who I consider to be my guru. His words and his teachings give me the greatest perception that I can understand of what I understand to be God or the universe. Anyways, thank you everybody for listening to Don't Get Lost in the Hype, episode 4. In this episode, I'm talking with Dima, who is a friend of mine and also somebody who does a lot of work, a lot of behind-the-scenes work in the Milwaukee artist community. He definitely deserves a lot of credit for many of the things, including the New State and the State Sessions. He helped curate this whole team of me, Niall, and Ashley Emerell. We're here to be a gateway into the New State and help young artists have events and learn about recording and mixing and mastering and whatever else we can do to provide for the Milwaukee community. In this episode, we actually talk about the New State a little bit, how he got involved, how I got involved. We talk about meditation and spirituality. We talk about the different hypes of circumstances and being born into different types of lifestyles and how expectations can actually be tools used for your goals. This has been a great conversation, and I'm very excited for y'all to listen to it. So everybody, I'm just going to jump right into it. This is Dima and Justin, aka Stin. Don't Get Lost in the Hype, episode 4. Dima.
Stin.
How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing awesome.
Excellent.
So I guess the question that I want to start off with is, what would you've done a lot of things from what I've heard for the past, what would you say, decade, 15 years with music and things of that nature?
Yeah, definitely about 15 years. Yeah.
Okay. So what would you say, do you have a definite title of what you do? Or do you want to get into the...
I'd say it's transitioned. And some of the titles were me trying to put a title on myself, and some of the titles were given to me by other people based on what I was doing with them or what service I was providing. So I guess I don't know if there's an official title.
Okay, so what would you say the different things you do the most of?
There goes the mic. The most that I do currently, I would say administrator and manager.
Okay.
It's kind of general.
Yeah.
And it can relate to a lot of different spaces.
Well, that's where I want to get into the nitty-gritty of different things that you do. So
yeah, administrator and manager, I'd say currently.
Okay. And so what would you say the hypes of being an administrator manager person are?
The hypes? And by that, do you mean in relation to Don't Get Lost in the Hype?
I would say in relation to...
Or the hype items that are, you're oh yeah, this is the shit.
That's the question. That's what I'm trying to get into, is figure out is hype good or is it bad? And what is hype to you? I want to ask.
Well, I'll tell you that the current state of administrator and manager that I'm in is not, there's not a lot of hype.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on, a lot of like Excel sheets or a lot of like, what do you call them? Caddies. Like you know, carry bags for people. I'm the bag man. I'm always got equipment. I've always got this, that, the other thing delivering. So it's fun and it's cool to be part of all these things, but it's a lot of work. And again, behind the scenes and pretty thankless, and you just grind through it. So I think there's probably another portion of this that's like on the other side of once success hits, or like once things that you're involved with are like more established and moving, where there is some hype in that position, because it's like, okay, there's no stress of failure because now it's kind of automated. There's maybe no, you know, there's no stress of finance, maybe because things are succeeding. There's no stress of not getting things done because you have the team around you that you need. And then you're seeing successes and motion and projects you're involved with. And I think that's when it would be like hype, I think. And it's like, man, that's the shit. That's amazing being in that position.
So hype is positive in this situation.
When you get there, yeah, I think there could be hype with this position for sure. But I think right now it's like more so, I don't think people want this position in on this level. So I don't think there's hype in it right now, because most, and I don't want to say most, but I think a lot of people aren't willing to buckle down and do the hard work to get to a certain place. And maybe the hype comes when you can say a title of yours and, you know, you're kicking your feet up and doing a CEO type things. Like, but that's not the case here. A lot of work and a lot of.
So amongst all of that work that you do, which is a lot of, you would say that's more of like the chaos side of things, all the different Excel sheets, even though it's, you say it's, you know, whatever, but it's very chaotic with everything you have to do. You have like 7 different projects going on. You have to work with this person, that person, do all this. How do you, I know we've kind of touched on this before, how do you stay grounded amongst all of that?
And what do you mean by grounded?
Grounded as in like not getting overwhelmed by everything. Or if you do get overwhelmed, how do you bring yourself down?
Definitely get overwhelmed. I used to practice this more, and I probably need to get back to it. I'd make lists of things, and I'd have different functions or different buckets, basically, or projects going on, or different like entities that exist, and I would create lists of things to do under each entity, and then I would look at it every day and prioritize on like what's most important that needs to get done, and try to focus on those things first, and then just grind through it. That over like half a decade, especially like end of 2020 or 2019, definitely felt myself burning out and starting to start like there was a stop to like the list making. There was definitely a rise in alcohol consumption and self-medicating with with herb or whatever it may be, to kind of sometimes just make myself feel okay and like missing some things, or like not always being on top of things. But I think through the end of last year, I've come to realize that you can't get everything done. And as long as you're doing something and you're still seeing the things that need to get done and just getting through them on your own accord, making sure you're leaving time for important things like family or hygiene, or, you know, just like even eating schedule, healthy eating habits, things like that are really important. And realizing that those things matter a lot too, I started to care less about pushing and driving myself so hard. And I think that really helped to find a balance again. And I think this whole pandemic thing that happened has allowed me to take that pause for myself. And then I think internally realize that it's okay that things aren't getting done as fast as I'd like them to. And being okay with it, because I'm realizing a lot of these things wouldn't get done, period, if I wasn't doing them. So just because they're not getting done this week and it's going to get done next week, it's okay, because otherwise they wouldn't be done.
On that note, I would say that you are somebody who is very driven. You like you were saying, you know that it's going to get done because you're going to do it regardless of like what happens. And I think this is an awakening that a lot of people have had over the past like year or so, like you were saying, where you can't get everything no matter like how much you push for it. And when you push for it, it almost feels like it runs away a little bit. So it's like, how do you try to stay kind of, like you were saying, how do you try to stay middle ground? I know we kind of talked a little bit on meditation, kind of breathing techniques. You said you do like visionary things where you say you imagine like a peaceful place and stuff like that. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the meditation part comes more with either trying to go to sleep or just like hitting a reset button midway through the day just to kind of refocus. One thing that I haven't done for a while that worked for me really well, and this was back in high school, so like 2001, 2002, I think 2001 was when I had the class. It was a psychology class, and the teacher was really cool, and I was really enjoying the subject matter. And in there, he shared with us a technique that he used to go to sleep that he learned a long time ago, that he shared with the class, and then I started trying it and practicing it. And I didn't continue to, but it worked for me, and that was really cool. And basically what happens is you lay in bed, and when you have a hard time falling asleep, or once it becomes habit, you just do it anyway just to go to sleep, you start to like focus your brain on relaxing your body first and making sure there's no tension anywhere, because a lot of times you don't even realize it, but when you first lay down, like you're in a position where certain parts of your body are tense. And when that's the case, you can't really fully relax and then calm your mind to go to sleep until that tension. And that's why a lot of times when you're starting to fall asleep, sometimes you feel your muscles jerk and you like have motion out of nowhere. It's because your muscles are releasing that tension, and that's what's happening. And until really all that's gone, you can't really fall asleep. So one way to deal with that is counting backwards from 10, for example. And when you start from 10, you say, okay, 10. And you first focus on the furthest parts from your heart. So like your toes, your fingers, maybe your neck or something, whatever, anything that's like furthest away. And you say 10. And then you start to think about, you start to focus on those limbs or those appendages. And you start to think about how are they as loose as they can be? Are they completely calm and relaxed and in comfortable position? And it's like, okay, yep, they feel good. And I almost don't feel them. All right, 9. Then you start to focus on your hands and your feet and maybe your shins or something. And like, are they completely numb or completely relaxed in a comfortable position? And when that happens, like, perfect, great. Okay, 8. And you start climbing up and up and up. And basically, you're going through the motions of making sure every part of your body is completely relaxed and comfortable in the position it's at. And suppose the whole goal is to be able to practice this to the point where you'll never reach 0. So by the time you get to 5, 4, 3, somewhere in there, you'll always fall asleep because you're just so relaxed and you're focused on one thing, and everything else that's in your life is out of your head, and then boom, you fall asleep. So that's a really cool technique that I've used and it's worked, and I've gotten to the point where I couldn't get to 0 anymore, and I'd be sleeping by,
Yeah, that reminds me of there's a, I don't know, I think I've talked about it a little bit. There's a show on Netflix called The Midnight Gospel, and it's about it's the guy who created Adventure Time, and then mixed with there's one of my favorite comedians, Duncan Trussell. He's kind of a psychedelic dude. He's voicing it and like writing it and stuff like that. And there's the last episode, it makes everyone cry because it's what they do with the show is they take real podcast audio and then they mix it with like crazy animation to like tell a loose story about a man who travels through like different universes and does like podcasting, which is kind of funny. That's cool. And the last episode is he talks with his mom, and his mom died back in 2012, and it's real audio from one of the last couple weeks of her life. It's like super sad because it's like you're watching everything unfold, and she's talking to him about like the same thing, saying you almost have to feel inside of your body, like feel your fingers, you have to like just, there is an energy, like it doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be your blood. It can be like whatever. Exactly. There's you just have to feel the inside of your body, and just like you're saying, count or like breathe, like just let it go type of thing. And it that shit always like bugs me out when I listen to it because it's awesome. But So you're talking about that, and then I want to go back to, you brought up self-medication, because I think that's something that everybody does, and they don't want to admit it, regardless of whether they drink, smoke, or do whatever. There's always something that people go to. What would you say the different hypes of like this day and age with like self-medication is?
Well, I'd never want to promote it because we call it self-medication because it, for a short period of time, makes you feel okay or better or at ease with things that you're worried about. But unfortunately, like, majority of people who self-medicate with whatever they do really are hurting themselves, because it's really not medicine. It's really just a toxin that goes into your body and does certain things within your body, and then you feel a certain type out of it. And I think self-medicating actually could suppress the problems, and a lot of people who, for example, smoke a lot of weed and say they self-medicate are actually just suppressing a lot of the issues that they grew up with, you know. And it's okay, but they just never were able to come out and work through those issues because they're so deep or so, you know, long ago. And that's hard and it's tough. And I think there's no hype with it. I like drinking. I like partying. I don't look down on anybody who experiments with drugs and things like that. Right. And I have seen people's lives get taken by drug addictions and things like that, friends and stuff. And that's hard. And it's hard to believe that, you know, a little partying or a little bit of depression can lead all the way to that point, but it does, and it can. And that's the scary part. So it's like, but then you think about like, you know, my teenage stepdaughter being in high school and having to go to a therapist because feeling depression and things like that. You think about, you know, if we were parents who didn't really care and the doctor recommended certain drugs for her to take, to prescribe to get through some of the harder times of depression or whatever you may be going through, is that something you want to allow your child to take and you think that's helping and that's healthy? I think that's probably even worse than drinking and smoking and whatever else we're doing. So there's probably a balance, because sometimes you need just to clear your mind and stop thinking about certain things, and sometimes the only things that can help with that are like things you put in your body. I
think it's a game of knowing when and where, and like timing, and timing is everything. Perception, I believe, is everything. So it's like you were saying, like on some hands, like people get helped from like taking prescribed medication, and other people take their lives from prescribed medication with something like weed or whatever, even though it is physically harmless, and even though like all those things, it can make you feel and confront things that you're not in the time or place to feel or confront.
Yeah.
So like if you're constantly, you know, I was talking about this with RG, I was like, when I was working at the factory, it was all day, every day, because I just wanted to be numb. Yeah. Like I just really wanted to, like, you know, not feel what I was feeling. But now that I'm out of there and I actually have stuff I have to do, and I actually have a job that like requires more work and, you know, all this stuff, and wanting to do the podcast and stuff with the state sessions and whatnot, like I'm realizing like I can wait till I get home. And when I do smoke, it's a little bit and whatnot. Or if I'm out with friends, I'll do that. But like all this stuff. So,
well, what I think one thing that takes time, and not everybody can get to that point, is like self-internalizing and being your own therapist in some ways. Like for me, I feel like I can talk to myself, and everybody's got a voice inside of them that they talk to. It's themselves, right? And you can't be scared of that, and you also can't ignore it, and you also can't be afraid to question it and to have conversations with yourself about your life and things you're going through, or your things in your past, and trying to understand to yourself why you are the way you are and how you're feeling and things like that. I think that helps a lot, but not everybody can do that. Because sometimes I think maybe their voice is beat down so far that they don't they go with the flow. Maybe they allow society to lead them. Maybe they allow other external things or their friends to lead them, and they really don't have a voice anymore. And that's scary. And I think realizing that your voice is really powerful and knowing that it's in there and it can help you as a person, but then you can also externalize it on a bigger level for it to help others. Like, you have to understand you are a powerful being and your thoughts are very powerful. And
people need to trust the divinity within themselves.
Yeah. And a lot of people never get to that point.
Yeah. And like you were saying, or I want to ask you this, do you think that is more of a situational thing, like circumstances, or do you think it's all mental and it's all...
It's hard to say. I think circumstance has a lot to do with how you turn out mentally. Yeah, I think circumstance has a lot to do with it, because how you develop early on as a child and even a teen, and what your influences are and how you learn to think and be from all of that will set you up for either like ability to understand that you are within yourself a God. Like you like, people search for God. Well, a piece of God is within you. You are a part of that. And like, a lot of people never come to that acceptance or realization that you have willpower and you have, like, the human and the soul and the spirit is an amazing thing. And there's so much power within that. And a lot of people never get past the realization of that. And I think circumstance has a lot to do with it. And then later on, if circumstance puts you in a certain position, you'll never take the steps to go for that self-discovery. You'll always be kind of not looking to open new doors and explore. And I think that's the scary part of current state and where things are at. I feel like people aren't doing enough self-exploration to understand who they are as people.
Well, and I would think that is what a lot of people fear, which I think has been already happening for so long. The whole like selling your soul type thing. I believe it is giving into, well, not even giving into, just being a victim of the circumstances, being a victim of like what's happening in your own life and things like that. Also talking about, like, I know I've brought up my auto finances or whatever. Like, I would consider that the same situation where it's like with selling your soul. It's like I was signing a contract to be like stuck for 5 years or whatever to pay off a car. And it's like that, that was my own doing. But I'm saying there are people that get caught in shitty situations, people just born into, a bad family or born into a bad neighborhood or born into like whatever.
Well, one thing that my good friend Speakeasy has pointed out to me maybe a couple years back, and I never really like even thought about this until he mentioned it, but think about a child showing up to school who A, has domestic abuse at home, or B, has a household that is to the point where you're kind of fending for yourself as far as like food and stuff like that. And think about a child who's coming into a system to go learn, and they're sitting at a desk where a teacher's trying to teach them, but the only thing they can think about is how they're going to get whooped after school at their house, or where I'm hungry and I haven't eaten since the day before yesterday. Where can I get my next meal? How the hell are you going to learn? Like, how the hell are you going to take any information in when you have these much bigger problems that are haunting you and will haunt you for the rest of your life? And those are the things that, like, we have to help, like, expose and try to help and, like, alleviate so people can realize that there is help, there is support, there's ways to get out of different situations. But a lot of younger people just can't. You just get complacent and you it becomes a norm, and then everything that you can be doing to better your future, you're not, because you're just so into what will today look like. Yeah. Will I have a meal at night, or how can I avoid getting beaten by my dad or stepmom or whatever?
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I kind of want to touch on the new state and state sessions and stuff like that. When did you get involved?
New state itself, 2006 started an independent record label because me and a friend saw all this talent in Milwaukee, and nobody was really out there like making money and blowing up out of Milwaukee and like doing great things. Milwaukee has had success. A lot of people that lived in Milwaukee or Wisconsin who moved out of Wisconsin had made names, book writers, other artists, other bands. Like, it has happened, but a lot of people had moved out of Wisconsin. But all this talent that I saw here becoming of age and being able to go see shows, like, nobody was doing bigger things. And I was like, why? Like, this seems like this is great. Like, this could be amazing. And 2006 was an interesting time because industry was changing for streaming and stuff. Napster, into LimeWire, into all iTunes, into digital streaming, into record labels being upset, and totally a shift in the industry. So to start a record label at that time was kind of, it wasn't wrong, but it was like the whole thing was shifting. Everything was shifting. You're like on this floating iceberg, and it's totally changing, and you don't know where it's going to go, and you're trying to start up a company within that. So it was whatever. But the realization of like the need to support artists in Milwaukee then jumped on it, started to help artists, realized like how Milwaukee and Wisconsin is, the mentality of artists, the resources we have in the Midwest. We are the Midwest and not East Coast or West Coast. So kind of the challenges of being a location based. Again, as things were changing for streaming, this wouldn't matter today, for example. I mean, it still would, but not as much. But New State itself, I'd say 2017, I want to say. So like I want to say like 2007, a year into having the record label, I was looking for office space because I was sick of recording people in my living room, and it was just nonstop. And so self-taught engineer, started working on Pro Tools. Ableton was my production software of choice at that time, and would always produce after work or record people after work and then on weekends. And then was looking for a space 2007, and somehow got turned on to John Hennessy, who's a owner-operator of Hennessy Group, who owns a couple development properties in the area, really on the near west side. And he was developing a property at the time on Wells and 27th that was going to have a cafe on the first floor, a restaurant, and second and third floor were still up for grabs. They were going to be office space. And it was a ran down building, completely gutted out, basically. And he was developing it, and it was going to be this great thing. Looked at the space. Obviously, it was far from being done at that point in time. I needed something right there and then because I was looking to get a space to move my studio operations into. And so the things didn't work out at that time. 10 years later, which happened to be 2017, John called me back because he remembered I had something to do with music because I told him Records, record label, looking to start up a studio space out of my move from my living room. And he called and he said, I remember you mentioned something about music. First, I want to show you the development you looked at 10 years ago. Yeah. It's done. So you can go see what it looks like. And even though now it was occupied, the downstairs was, the occupant was Daddy's Soul Food, great restaurant, great food, awesome Southern cuisine, really good home style cooking. And then the second and third floor got taken up by like a nonprofit church organization, like a Lutheran something nonprofit. Beautiful building, turned out great. Would have been great to have a space in there, but just didn't work out. And then again, developments like this sometimes take, again, a decade, That's like shit. And so he showed me the building that was now done 10 years later. And he said, the reason I really called you was there's this other building that the city's looking to tear down. And me being, an advocate for the neighborhood, I've been here forever. And knowing other people in the neighborhood, they don't want to see this building go because of its historic value of being the new store. It used to be the Palms, which was the Electric Ballroom and other things before that. That was like the home to some amazing, in the 70s and 80s, it was like this, there's this like booming punk rock scene in Milwaukee. And that was like the spot to go see bands and perform. And like, it was a thriving scene. And John knew that a lot of people in Milwaukee didn't want to see that building go. And the city, after 2017 fall, there was a fire. And I think he called me like that winter. The fire had been set in the front of the building where the second story got burnt up. And the city at that point was like, that's it. We're putting out bids for demolition for this building. And so at that point, John was like, I need to see if I can take some action to save the historic building or no. So we had gotten together, brainstormed some ideas. So 2017 was end of 2017. I want to say was the year where we sat down and conceptualized something that was like, through the years of 2006 to 2017, I've seen the struggles and pain points of artists and entertainment industry in Milwaukee. Knowing all ages was an issue, knowing there was not a lot of spots to go to for anybody under 21. Not really a lot of support. Yes, there's organizations around here for artists and music and hip hop and graffiti and stuff, but like, it's not enough. It wasn't enough. And when you think about arts and performing and music and writing, there's a lot of, I think, mental health things that can be derived out of that type of skill. And I think there's a lot of like self-learning that can be done out of those types of skills. There's a lot of benefits to allowing a young person to like have access to self-exploration in the creative aspect. And Milwaukee's always lacked that for the young community. And so to sit down with a group of people and start to talk about what could be a solution for that, and realizing there could be a building potentially that could support that, how it would operate and run, what would the things be, what the things inside of it would be that would help this concept and idea, and really coming up with like an all-around general concept of an all-ages space that also has a theater for performance and booking national acts and obviously hometown support. Internally having multiple studio spaces, one to be a for-profit business that is moved from a different location that would continue to operate. Mammoth Audio, it became one of the top sought-out engineers and producers in Milwaukee, who recently just kind of had to say, hey, I got to stop taking bookings because I need to focus on myself too. And so he became very exclusive. And but his bigger goals are to get a bigger studio and to hire some people and to have interns and to build his business up. But it's like, it's hard to do in a single room out of a warehouse you're working out of, and you need something better and more custom. And so he was on the forefront of my mind. And then at that time I was aware of Free Space, but wasn't involved. But very quickly, Charles, who owns Mammoth Audio, fiance, brought up Janice, who was operating and running, or was a third of the group that was running Free Space, which was a great organization for Milwaukee, which focused exactly on that opportunity and platform for all ages, literally all ages, to step up to the stage. First of all, to step up to the stage and see somebody more experienced perform, but then also have the ability to go and perform themselves and to hone in on their skills. In a couple of years, it showed success as far as the reaction and response from the younger community to say, hell yeah, we want this. And that was like an automatic, we got to get Janice involved. And part of that was Sam Webster X, who's a prominent artist in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, who's been making waves and developing his skill set and becoming an artist as far as like full-time, So he's had experience in that realm, and the challenges and successes that he's seen. He knows other people are going through the same stuff. So sitting down with them, having somebody like John as the developer, having somebody like Andrew Parker, who's a community advocate, having someone who like myself, who's kind of spanned the spectrum of all those things. We were really able to like pinpoint the problems or the needs and like conceptualize solutions and what could be. And then everybody's wearing their own hats. So like somebody like John then went and, pitched this concept to the city to say, hey, don't demolish this building because I have a group of individuals, including myself, who have a vision for it. And this is the vision. And as soon as we started presenting the vision and anybody we would present it to, it was like an automatic, like, wow, this sounds like a great idea. Like, okay, we won't demolish this building. You have until the end of, I think at that time, we got till the end of 2018 to show us that you can do something to buy the property and raise money and do whatever. So that was kind of this launching point of it, end of 2017.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm trying to remember I don't remember the exact date I got involved. It was like 2018, 2019, like towards the end of 2018 or something like that.
Towards the end of 2018.
Yeah.
That you got involved.
Yeah. I remember seeing, I think it might have been Webster X that shared a post about it, like right when it jumped off. Like I remember hearing something about it. And it was insane because it was around the time when I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, I want to be involved in the local music scene more, and I want to like help and do things because I kind of was at a self-discovery point in my life. And I was literally thinking like if I just had something to go to, like an organization, something like I know there's so many different things. I had heard of Free Space, but I didn't know if it was still happening, where it was, like what was going on. Like I had no information. So I was like, oh no. And I remember seeing a post about it, and I was like, it's like, fuck it. I was like, I'm just going to spam the email. And I did for a while. And it wasn't that long, but it was probably like a month or something like that. And I remember Janice getting back to me and saying like, hey, like we'd love to have more people involved, like, all this stuff. And then after a little bit of that, we ended up meeting and like talking about it. And I remember being like nervous because I didn't know like what was entailed, like was I like just doing whatever. But when we talked, it was like instant like click of like, oh, this is something that like I really need to be involved in. I need to like be a part of and stuff like that. And it was a crazy journey since then. I mean, we had the Pocket Park events, and then like just all the planning. I remember helping Janice like paint the benches and like all this stuff. And then obviously like COVID hit once we started getting rolling with the state sessions. And but I think it's cool because we have all this stuff in our bag that we're just like waiting to like execute and unleash. Yeah. And I'm super excited about it. Going back with getting involved in stuff, I remember you had hit me up and you were like, hey, like, can you meet, like, want to talk about stuff? And I was like, yeah, sure, like, whatever. And then I remember going to a Nile show, and afterwards I was saying, see you later to him. And he's like, oh, did you talk to Dima yet? And I was like, oh yeah, we're talking tomorrow. And he just goes, all right. And then just like smiled. And I was like, what the fuck is that about? And you brought up the idea of like what we wanted to do with the team. And I remember thinking back to the first Pocket Park when I messaged Niall and I said, hey, I don't know how or when, but we're going to work together. And I was like, that, like I said that and it connected. So it was like, it started making me think like, okay, like this is something I'm supposed to be on. Like, even if it's, hitting, COVID and all the things going on, it's like, we're still moving, we're still going. And I think that we definitely need, just for anybody listening, we need some support with donations. Do we still have the masks going on even through?
Yeah, the masks are custom made. So, New State itself, as the concept and project as it's moving forward, and we've made strides and leaps and bounds by acquiring the property, already investing into asbestos abatement, which is like, we couldn't have access to a portion of the building because of it. We couldn't move forward with development, things like that. We finally fundraised enough to do the asbestos abatement. We also bought the property next door, which is in between the Pocket Park and the New State Theater. So the project grew itself, which is amazing. Now we have a concept for a coffee shop next to this that's going to look out to the Pocket Park, which is a music themed Pocket Park that's going to have a stage and things like that. And I mean, it's going to be great. But New State itself is a development, and we had talked about creating like, okay, well, Free Space as the concept and what it was kind of the heart and soul of what we saw the new state to be. And we didn't necessarily know how that was going to develop. And I think shortly after acquiring all of the property, we decided that it's necessary to start being active. And we created another wing of the new state, which was called the State Sessions. And that was initiated really by Janice and Sam as far as the idea, Webster X, to say, listen, we need to start being active. We need young people to engage with us. We need to give them resources. We need to provide them, because we saw the free space work. We saw the need was there. And without taking free space and continuing free space within New State, which was also kind of kicked around, we decided to start what we called the State Sessions, which is basically free-form programming and opportunities and what would be the heart and soul of the new state and what the young people would cling on to as far as like, oh, these are the things I can be doing or I can be involved with. The new state is kind of the more corporate global name. And I think the State Session is going to be the day-to-day initiatives and programming and things that we get involved with the community with.
Yeah. And I'm very excited once we're able to like actually have events and people come through, because that's like kind of the biggest thing is we will really want to, I know we've had a few people message us about getting involved, and it's like we have stuff there. We're just waiting to like figure out how to unleash, execute and stuff like that. So I'm very excited about that. I think we got a good team. Both Niall and Ashley they've been doing a lot, and they've involved in free space and doing all that stuff. And it was funny when you had messaged me, part of me was like, do they know that I'm not I'm like, I don't do anything really. I'm here and I'm involved and I'm helping out. I was like, they asked me for a reason. Yeah. So like, I was like, I need to like commit to it. And so I'm glad we got the podcast going. This is our second one. Niall's got his interviews coming up. Ashley's board member now and all that stuff. And
there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think it comes back to like what we started off with as far as you asking me on what my title is.
Yeah.
A title is more like, what are you currently doing?
Yeah.
And it's always developing and it's always changing, and you have to realize what hat you're wearing in the current time and then do the best you can with that in that title. But I think realizing what that title is important. So, a similar question can come back to you is like, what do you consider yourself to be as far as a title? And if you can't answer that question, it's something you should focus on and kind of think about, and it will change. But what are you right now? Is an important thing to answer. It'll allow you to kind of sometimes scrub through your lists of things to do and focus. Like if my title is a certain thing, then I know out of a list of 100 things, what things I should be doing based on my title. And sometimes that helps weed through like
the hype.
The hype.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually something that's very real. I would say it's something that I know I need to work on a lot with that's why, like I said, starting this podcast, don't get lost in the hype. It's very much, there's hypes of everything going on. You always feel like you have to be doing something, always feel like you have to be accomplishing something, and that's just human nature. That's kind of like the curse of man or whatever you want to call it. Because even man, woman. Yeah, man, woman. Yeah, even if the most lazy quote unquote people, I know everybody has like a fire in them, like you were talking about trusting your inner divinity. Mm-hmm. Like everybody has this push that they want to reach a goal or something like that, and that's something I've been asking the past couple episodes. And I want to ask you, how do you differentiate goals and expectations? Because when you expect something, you usually get set up for disappointment, and goals, are goals.
Oh man, that's a good question. How do you differentiate expectations and goals? I would say Man, that's a really good question. How do you differentiate expectations and goals? So I think every person should have goals, and the expectation should be to reach those goals.
So you're using expectation as a tool then, almost.
Yeah, an expectation is like a checkbox that I can check when I finish it. Let's take my family and as an example. Like, I want to be a good father to my daughter. That's a goal of mine. Whether I'm going to be successful in that or not, I don't know, because that's my own whole journey. But it's not an expectation of mine to be a good father. It's just a goal, and I try to do what I can. But sometimes I go off the rails and I yell and I'm angry, and sometimes, she gets a slap on the wrist for doing something that I'd expect she wasn't supposed to or whatever. And so I think I live by just having goals, and my expectation only gets checked off when it's done.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's a interesting. It's a good answer, and it's interesting because I always looked at it and kind of changed my perspective on things, because I was always looking at like goals and expectations as like there's been so many times, like this year I expected to go to Bonnaroo.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to, we'd be, doing all this stuff, and I expected to have like more money and all that. I was expecting a lot, but there was a disconnection between the actual goals I wanted to accomplish and my expectations. So when you saying that, it made me realize like, oh, like you can use an expectation to reach your goals, or like but if that makes sense. For me, it was like a bit of a disconnect, and I know this goes with a lot of people. That's kind of why I'm trying to make connections with people. Yeah. I always looked at expectations as, how do I describe it? Like just, it was just something like you expect, like you can't change everything. Like you talk about changing the times, LimeWire and things like that. Like it's kind of going with the flow of things. It's like, oh, it's pushing me in a different direction than I thought I was going. Like life just kind of happens like that, and things just kind of unfold as they do. And I feel like when people expect like, oh, this is the direction I'm heading, so by next year I'm going to be over there, but then also life pushes you this way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think maybe that's where you have to realize that expectations for you as an individual are going to be constantly morphing, because when you're a young person and you're in high school, there's expectations of you to go to school and to graduate. And then after high school, there's expectations of you to become a citizen and to utilize your rights to vote and to become a part of the workforce. And you're expected to either go work or go get an education. So there's like all these expectations that are set up for you. And I think you have to choose what your goals are and move around the expectations that the society puts on you versus your own internal expectations, which should be triggered by your goals. And I think the expectation should just be checked off when you get it, and that's just the accomplishment of goal. And I think expectations, just like goals, morph through your life by society. But then I think internally you have to be goal-driven to accomplish things and to feel some kind of self-fulfillment. Because if you just have a bunch of expectations, if you never get to any of them, you're going to be super sad. And you'll probably be depressed, and you just never achieve anything. That's why you just sit there and do nothing. So I think for me, I've always been goal-driven, and expectations have always just been like a outside external pressure, and then finally check mark when I accomplish something.
Okay. So what would you say, let me ask you this. I kind of been getting into this conversation with everybody, and I know this is not really a wrap-up question, I guess. We can go as long as whatever.
Yeah.
Do you believe, I'm just going to say it how it is. Do you believe in any sort of God? or any sort of higher power?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it a little bit before as far as the and I didn't mention the other technique of meditation, which I really this is the better technique that I use more frequently that we should come back to before we wrap up. But it's been an interesting journey for me because even though I'm a certain religion by origin, so I came from Moscow, Russia. Family was like Orthodox Christian. We never really practiced and stuff, and came here and didn't really do a lot of research on religion. Didn't understand a lot of stuff like that. But I think through time and after high school and after getting out of my parents' house, I've experienced some religious things as far as like church attendance or like seeing a baptism or like, things like that. And and then I'm also a very factual type of person. So I'm a science-based and, I believe in science and evolution and those types of things. And it fascinates me, this world itself. And through listening to a lot of people, like, not the Jehovah's Witnesses, but a lot of like rappers was it called 5%ers?
Yeah. That's funny. We talked about this on ArcG's thing. Yeah.
So, listening to people who are part of the 5% and talk about the Quran and talk about Islam and talk about those types of things, I think I've gathered enough information around to realize that I don't need to be part of
a religion,
an organized religion.
Yeah.
I don't need to be part of that to realize myself and to discover myself and to also realize that there is a higher power. And this is where I mentioned, like, each one of us can make a choice. We all have the ability to make a choice, and that's the power that's instilled with us, I think, from God. And God is a thing in everybody, and that's why we have free will, and that's why we can make these decisions and choices on free will. And I think whatever the higher power is, I think we're all connected to it in some way. I just don't really understand how. It's beyond me to understand all that. But I think internally, there's definitely a higher power that lives within all of us on a different plane, like as far as like spiritual something.
I think there's definitely, we're closing the gap. The reason why I think there's a lot of different of these events going on with like COVID and all the stuff that the media is pushing on us. I think that there's a closing of gap between science and spirit. I think we're starting to understand that the things that science is trying to explain is the spirit, the growing of plants, the life and death of everything. I think the stories of like Jesus is a story of death and resurrection and coming to yourself, of like this too shall pass type of thing, like just trusting the inner divinity, the Christ within you. That's the language that I know. I know there's languages talking about like you with the Quran and Islam and Hinduism, Buddhism. There's all these different languages trying to describe the one thing. And it's almost like, to me, this was a crazy psychedelic vision I had. I'm very, whatever, but it's like there's a room filled with all these eyes, and there's just eyes everywhere, and they're all like pointing towards the center, and in the center there's this thing, and this thing is what I perceive to be as truth. And all these eyes are staring at truth, but truth looks different from every angle. So all the eyes are trying to describe, like, no, I see truth as this, I see truth as this. And they're all describing the same thing, but it's just from their perspective. And that's kind of what you were saying, and what I'm trying to connect with is we all have the one thing. It's all there. What's happening is happening, even if you don't like it, even if, things, obviously, like, there's touchy situations and stuff like that. Like, I believe there's a lot of injustice in the world, and I believe there's a lot of like awful things that are happening by people to people. But it's like, the way I see it, like my dog, and you have dogs, my dog sometimes likes to fight with his tail.
Yeah.
And sometimes he gets so into it, and then he'll bite his tail and then yelp, and it's just like, you forgot that the tail was a part of you. you forgot that was like you were one body, you were just fighting with yourself, and like it was all a game, and it was sorry, I'm getting too deep now, but yeah, I guess we'll wrap this up. So is there any last things that you want to like promote, talk about, anything you want to put?
Well, yeah, definitely the new state sessions, please contact us as far as creative artists, young individuals who want to find resources or get help or ask questions. Like, we're there for you. So use this as a resource. The new state, keep promoting and keep telling people about it. We need help, financial help, to make this a success. It's a really big project, and it's all going to be self-funded, really. So we're on a good start, but we're far from hitting our goal. So I think that's the most important. New state, mke.org, to help Wisconsin. And I think this is replicable in every major city. So this concept itself, I think, can actually be nationally spread, and this could be something really big. But again, this could be a good first pilot project and show the success. There's actually some other projects similar to this, but on a bigger scale, that have had success and had much bigger funding and have changed neighborhoods and people drastically and future generations. So I know this works, and I know this is going to be great if and when it happens. So that's really the promotional side. But I think the last word, the other meditation technique that really I like, I read in this little meditation book. It was like quick meditation that you can do anywhere. One stuck in my mind that I really liked using because it worked. And basically all it is, and they were trying to teach you techniques that you don't necessarily need to take like an hour and a half, like go into the trance and listen to certain things. It's more like you got 5 minutes to spare. Like, you want to just do a quick reset button? Like, this is the shit. And how it went was, everybody's been somewhere on a beach where they've looked at the water, and the water is endless, and all you see is the horizon, and you don't see the other side, right? There's nothing else. And always, whether it's a lake or an ocean, you look at the horizon where the sky meets the water, and it's pretty flat. Sometimes if it's like rough sea or whatever, you see the chop, and you see that it's not a perfect line. And the whole concept of this is, when you first close your eyes and you start to imagine that place that you remember where you saw the horizon and you saw the water meeting the sky, and it was a vivid memory for you because it was a special place, or it was a vacation or whatever, or maybe on the Lake Michigan as we are here, you remember it vividly, and when you close your eyes, you can picture it. And so the whole point of this meditation technique is to close your eyes and to envision that place that you saw, that horizon where the sky meets the water line. And you remember it being a little choppy, and there's waves, and the waves are coming and going, and it's how it is. And you have to relate those waves and the motion of that water to your thoughts. And so you start to think about, your thinking is actually, you know how when you look at like, I forgot what the tool is called at the hospitals, but it measures your heart.
Yeah.
And it goes boop, 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 and it's got the waves going. So those waves, you have to imagine them as the waves at the horizon. And your whole point is to calm the waves and to get rid of them. And you have to think of your thought process and your thoughts that are interjecting as those bad waves that are showing up, whether they're choppy on the thing, or they're on the meter of your heart rate. And your whole point of this meditation technique, when you close your eyes and you imagine yourself at this place and this vivid visualization of the horizon with the water and the sky, you have to remove all the thoughts that are causing the waves. And you have to focus strictly on the horizon and seeing the horizon become flat. And that's your focus. And when you can focus on that, and you can visualize the horizon with the water and the sky meeting, and you focus really hard to stop the thought process of creating waves, because your thoughts are the waves that are causing the disturbances, when you can make them flat and focus on that, that's when you're in like peace and serenity. And if you see some thoughts pop up, the waves come back, and you have to try to get rid of them again. And when they become flat, it's calm again. And there's no thoughts. And when you can focus on that for an extended period of time, you usually end up falling asleep, because you have no other thoughts. You're just focusing on flattening the line of the horizon, and you're visualizing a place that you actually been to. And the combination of that helps you get rid of all the other thoughts racing through your mind. And if they pop up, you focus on getting rid of them. And when you see the flat line, and eventually you just fall asleep. And the point of that whole meditation technique is it's supposed to be an easy visualization, because you've been to that spot, you've seen that vision before, and now just focusing to get rid of your thoughts, you can do that same thing sitting at a desk at your office or in a school when you're like, oh, so much going on. Just close your eyes for literally 3 minutes and picture that. Focus on getting rid of your disturbances, and in 3 minutes, when you reopen your eyes and you were focusing on getting rid of your other thoughts and flattening the line, you feel refreshed. You feel like you open your eyes and you're like, whew, that was nice. Like, what was that all about? You feel refreshed. You feel more energized. You feel like less stress. So that I've actually used, like, outside of just trying to go to sleep. Like, I've used this in my office. Like, when I just need like a quick reset for my mental, like, doing that has really, really helped me a lot.
It's funny you say waves, because like you're talking about like the heart monitors. They call it, I think it's just, they call them brain waves too. So it's like,
yep.
And that's another wavy mad scientist. Like,
yeah.
Although like wavy is a slang for like being in touch with things, I guess. I don't know. It was more so like I was in a deep psychedelic trance, and I was thinking waves of like consciousness, waves of the brain waves, the heart waves, the waves of the sea, the waves of everything. Like, what you do gets pushed out in a wave. Like, we are nothing but vibration and stuff like that. So, all right, man. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Yeah, of course. We should do more episodes. There's so much to talk about. God damn.
I know. I'm trying to think. There's so many things I'm like, that's the same thing. Yeah, I can't wait till I start being able to do repeat episodes.
Right, episodes, follow up, some like new content, but also touching base on like, hey, what we covered before. How are things going?
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to Don't Get Lost in the Hype, episode 4. I would encourage everyone to go to newstatemke.org to figure out how to get involved, whether it be through donations or whatever. We will be having some sort of, I don't know, I don't want to put too much out there, but we will be figuring something out with the state sessions where we can start getting people involved more and hopefully hosting events even with COVID going on. We definitely do have to be safe. Safety is a priority. So maybe we'll have to hand out masks and hand sanitizer and stuff, but we definitely don't want to let anything stop us from providing the best of the best in the Milwaukee scene. And not just Milwaukee, but Wisconsin in general. So yeah, stick it around. Stay tuned for many things to come. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, I appreciate everyone listening. This has been Don't Get Lost in the Hype, episode 4. Thank you. Have a wonderful time, wherever time it may be.